catching up with Coach Gene Clemons of Giants Country and Talk Spicy podcast to find out what kind of a plan the New York Giants can pursue as far as improving in year 2 of the Brian Daboll era. That's coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. Patricia Traina here with you, and my special guest today is Coach Gene Clemons, writer over at Giants Country and also a regular contributor here on the Locked On Giants podcast for his X's and O's, has his own podcast, Talk Spicy, does a lot of writing for it's got that t-shirt going or that sweatshirt going. He does a lot of writing for The Athletic. He works with Emery Hunt, who I hope to have on the show at some point before the draft. So he is all over the place, a budding star. Coach Gene, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you, PT. Always a pleasure to come and sit and talk some football with you. So,
all right. Well, we got a lot to talk about with the
absolutely.
Giants. So, Coach Gene, let's start off by recapping the Giants, what a lot of people are saying, the Giants' surprising development over year 1. What stood out to you most on the offensive side of the ball as something that, you know, if I had said to you, this was going to happen at the start of the season, you would have said, nah, no way this is going to happen. So what stood out to you most?
The reduction of turnovers. I think that's one of the things that's plagued this offense over the last few years under the Daniel Jones tenure. And so for him to come out and be a lot more judicious with the ball, be a lot more quick, decisive with the ball, and keep the ball out of harm's way, he allowed his team to stay in games because he didn't continually put the opposition in easy scoring advantages by turning the ball over. I think that is by far the number one thing that the offense, was able to change. I think it's a testament to Brian Daboll and how he's grown as an offensive mind, because this Brian Daboll did not exist in Alabama. This Brian Daboll was not good in Alabama. And when he took the job with the Bills, I had a lot of reservations because of how he handled Jalen Hurts in Jalen Hurts' second year in that Alabama offense. But what he was able to do in Buffalo, with getting Josh Allen to reel in the turnovers, and now what he's been able to do in New York with getting Daniel Jones to reel in the turnovers, that's definitely a testament to him. But that is the number one thing of this offense that we've seen change, and probably the impetus for all the success that they had this year, especially in the first half. Second half of the season, a little bit different.
How so is it a little bit different?
I mean, I think that once Saquon Barkley started dealing with being nicked up and injured and not really performing to the level that he had performed when healthy in the first half of the season, we saw the warts. Like, we saw the things that we go, okay, yeah, they won some games this year, but that model in the first half of the season is not going to be sustainable unless we continue to improve these other things about our offense. And so I think that the turnovers keep you in games, but they don't win you, or lowering the turnovers keep you in the games, but they're not going to win you the games. You still have to go out and win the games. And so in the first half of the season, with the healthy Saquon, they were able to win those games. And then in the second half of the season, when Saquon was not as healthy for times, they weren't able to win those games. And that's why we saw the majority of their victories in the first half of the year. And we saw it drastically dissipate in the second half of the season.
How much did the Giants offense change to better suit what Daniel Jones does well? I mean, we saw the stick routes by Jason Garrett. We saw a bunch of stuff that just was so antiquated. What do you think the main changes were that Daboll and Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, implemented that just enabled Daniel Jones to have a little bit better success this year overall?
Well, I'll push back in the sense of antiquated for what they were doing last year or the last 2 years. I don't believe it was antiquated. I just don't believe it fit Daniel Jones. You know, if those same routes and those same things were working for Dak Prescott, there's no reason why they should not have worked for Daniel Jones, except Daniel Jones isn't that guy. Like he's not Dak Prescott. So if we're keeping it there, I'll keep it there. But what I do think they did a good job of articulating to Jones is that it's okay to be an athlete. I think that was one of the I don't know if in the past, I have no proof of this, they were telling him be careful, you know, watch what you're doing. And I'm sure they told him to be careful this past year. But you could see that there was purpose. He was purposeful in his athleticism. It's really interesting because And I've joked about this a while about him being more, you know, DeAndre Jones and you know, than Daniel Jones, and he would have a lot more success. And he did that this year. It was look, read, nothing there. Okay, cool, I'm out. And he was using that athleticism. He was becoming a weapon with his legs. I think that 100% changes the math. I mean, if you take his legs away and you look at his performance, it's not an impressive performance. Like, it's not an impressive season. It's only a more impressive season because you add over 700 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. Like, if you don't have that, then the season does not look the same. The wins don't look the same. So them enabling him to kind of get back, make that quick read. That quick read's not there. We know we don't have a lot of time with the blocking. Let's just get out of Dodge. I think it helped the offensive line because he was decisive in his running. It wasn't scrambling around and buying time like you see some of the other athletic quarterbacks possibly do because they're waiting on guys to get open and they know they can get out. It was make a quick decision. Now I'm gone. And now the defense has to deal with me as a rusher, which then brings them up and allows me to hit those deep crossers over the middle or out wide, which he was able to do. We've never questioned Daniel Jones' arm talent. We've always questioned his decision making. You know, what is he doing out there? I remember specifically last year, we sat on this podcast and went sometimes we don't know what he's doing. Like, what is he thinking? And I don't think we were ever in that situation this year where we sat back and looked at what he was doing and said, what is he thinking? It always looked very decisive this year. So that decisiveness and being confident in the decision that he made, good or bad, I think that helped the Giants be successful this year. And that's a testament to what the coaching staff has done with them for sure. It's a testament for him because not everybody can make those adjustments, right? Mm-hmm. For some people, that's just ingrained in their DNA to be who they are. And so the fact that he was willing to kind of change what had been taught to him at Duke, which is be Peyton Manning, be Eli Manning, to change his spots and really be a different type of quarterback. We got to give Daniel Jones a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Gene, moving forward, going into year 2, as we record this, we don't know if Mike Kafka is going to be back. He is reportedly one of the finalists for the Arizona Cardinals head coaching job. Regardless, I think we could all agree that maybe most of this offense came down with Daboll from Buffalo. So I don't know how much of an impact that would have, but let's just say, you know, let's say everything stays the same and Kafka does come back. What is the next step this offense can take in its development? What wasn't it doing that you think maybe with a few new pieces or, okay, now we have the basics down, we're going to go to level 2 of this offense. What can they do in 2023?
Well, if you listen to the fans, they think that the only thing they need to do is improve the talent around Daniel Jones. I actually don't believe that it's a talent thing. I think it's interesting because we say, oh, well, they found a gem, in this receiver, or well, Slayton has been this, but then they turn around and say, well, he doesn't have any weapons. Like, well, pick one or the other. Does he have weapons or does he not have weapons? Like, is Isaiah Hodges a number 2 receiver, or is he just some guy off the street? Like we can't have it both ways. So I think that obviously adding talent is always a good thing. It's always going to be better. But I think that what they really need to improve on, in my mind, is developing a much better screen game. Not a lot of the quick screens that you see other teams use to change the mathematics when the running game isn't clicking. You see Philadelphia do it all the time. If they're not getting any success with the run game, here comes a quick pass to Devontae Smith to pick up 6 and 7 yards, or a quick pass to Dallas Goedert to pick up 6 and 7 yards. I'd like to see them develop more of that for this offense. Just a quick catch and get the ball out the hand of your quarterback. Allow those offensive linemen to still be run blockers, which they're more adept at, especially when they add a legitimate center in the draft or in free agency, which they absolutely have to do. And then when you couple that and bring in that screen game, I think you have to have more designed big shots. Part of the reason Daniel Jones didn't throw as many interceptions this year is because he really didn't put the ball in jeopardy very much. Now, you could say he doesn't have that personnel. Okay, you could say that, but with the 49ers, Shanahan doesn't care what the personnel is. He's designing people to be running wide open downfield. So if it can be done one place, it can be done another place. Now, do you probably need to add a legitimate X, a legitimate guy? I'm not going to say a number 1 because I think sometimes number 1s are you get lucky, but you need to add a legitimate X receiver, a guy who can be on the outside and you can send deep, that you can throw a 50-50 ball and feel comfortable that's a 70-20, that's a 70-30 ball for that guy. That's what they thought they had in Kenny Golladay. And it ended up not working out for injuries, and maybe he never recovered. But shout out to him for how he conducted himself this year. I thought that was fantastic. But adding that element in to stretch the field vertically is only going to be able to open up more running lanes for whoever the running back is next year. Let's hope it's Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. And then also open up more lanes for that screen game to be even more lethal, which I believe they need to add. So screen game, quick passes outside on the perimeter, and then being able to stretch the field either deep down the middle or deep down the side for those 50-50 balls that we know that's the way the game is played, because you either get a reception, you get a pass interference, and the pass interference call has become a weapon in the NFL, and offenses use it. They're like, hey, we're going to throw it up and take a chance that your DB is going to panic and grab our guy or hit our guy. We get a pass interference penalty, and now we move the ball 40, 50, 60 yards. That's just how the game is being played now, and I think the Giants have to be able to put that in to their offensive philosophy.
Final question I want to ask you about the offense before we flip over to the defense. People are kind of split, I think, regarding Saquon and Daniel and the importance. I see the Giants as building around Daniel more so than Saquon. So assuming that is the approach they take and that is the best approach, if they can't bring Saquon back for whatever the reason, how much does that offense change? Or maybe does it not change as much because they figure they can plug another running back in there?
The arrogance of teams is usually the precursor to the downfall of the team. we have seen across the league teams go, well, we can just plug any running back in. And we've seen those teams suffer when they lose a really quality running back and they go and try to plug any running back in. I believe that if you're going to build around Daniel Jones, which I don't know if is the best model, but if that's what you're going to do, then building around Daniel Jones needs to be coupled with bringing Saquon back. Like, I believe that is I don't believe you have to keep Daniel Jones in order to keep Saquon. But I believe that if you're going to keep Daniel Jones, you need to have a legitimate weapon for him next to him in order to make that second part of his game as lethal as it can be. Part of him being such a dangerous runner is them knowing that there's another dangerous runner back there with him. And so can you rely on 700 yards and 7 touchdowns every single season? The great runners at quarterback don't rush for 7 touchdowns a season. So, like, not every season. So if you're trying to pencil in 700 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns from your number 2 rusher who happens to be your quarterback every year, then you have to have a number 1 rusher that is to the level of Saquon Barkley. And I think that when you tandem those guys together, like, that's the nucleus, that's the core of your offensive weaponry, your quarterback and your running back. Now, if they decide to let Saquon go, I don't think there's a plug and play out here in free agency, because these guys are not the same as Saquon that's out there. Like, Saquon really does have this uniqueness about him of size and shiftiness that a lot of these guys don't have. You either have guys who have size but are straight line runners. You have guys who are smaller that are shifty. You don't really get the best of both worlds in all of those guys. And if you go out into free agency and you bring in a guy, if you're bringing in a guy on low money, then there's a chance he's probably washed. See Matt Breida. If you bring in somebody who isn't washed, like if you're able to say, okay, we're going to get rid of Saquon, but we're going to bring in Josh Jacobs. Are you bringing in Josh Jacobs for anything less than you were going to be able to get Saquon to re-sign for? Most likely not. So now you're just changing in one for the other, but Saquon is still a mid-20s running back with a lot of tread on the tires. So now you're talking about, if you want to try to add an elite talent, you're going back into the draft. But with your draft position, are you going to be in a place to be able to take a Bijan Robinson? Are you going to be in a position to take one of those guys that are seen as the elite level rushers in college? And are they anywhere near Saquon? Like, I like Bijan a lot, but Bijan's not Saquon. I like Jahmyr Gibbs a lot, but Jahmyr Gibbs is not Saquon. So if you're going to have Daniel Jones be your quarterback, you have to have a dangerous person next to him, because that's what opens up the dynamic of him as a rusher, along with him just running during passing downs. So I think both of them go hand in hand, but if they don't keep Saquon, they absolutely need to make it a priority to bring in a guy who can be a home run hitter at the running back position.
To pair up with, obviously, with a guy who could be a threat in the passing game, I would assume.
Absolutely. That's one of those things that we haven't even seen this offense really take advantage of with Saquon. Like the fact that he can be a 90 catch, 1,000-yard receiver, we haven't even really seen them like incorporate that into the level that I thought they would this year. But I also then have to remember that Daboll didn't really use running backs that much in Buffalo. So it might be something that he's still getting comfortable with. I'm surprised Kafka didn't bring over a package of what the Chiefs used to do when they had Kareem Hunt, because I felt like that would have been the model for using Saquon in the offense, is doing it very similar to the way Kansas City used Kareem Hunt a few years ago before he had his issues and ended up in in Cleveland. So we'll see how that goes.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Unfortunately, life doesn't come with a user's manual. So when it's not working for you, it's normal to feel stuck. That's why seeking therapy to help you navigate through life's ups and downs can be your first step toward overcoming these challenges and learning productive coping skills. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, secure, and accessible online anywhere. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. And if things don't work out for you, you can always switch to a new therapist anytime. There's no more waiting rooms or traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, spelled HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Gene, let's talk about the defense. Where did that defense make the biggest jump with Wink Martindale as its coordinator?
Well, I mean, let's be fair to what Patrick Graham did. I think that he did a great job. That defense had an offense that was moribund. And so like they had to be on the field a lot more. I think that what we saw with Coach Wink's defense, which was different, was him deciding, well, the biggest thing for it was him making the decision that Dexter Lawrence was going to play in the middle of that defense. That he was going to be the one technique, zero technique, over the center guy on a regular basis, and moving really to that, to him being there and bringing Williams in as almost a full-time defensive tackle, 3 technique, and playing those linebackers on the outside. We saw a lot in Graham's defense where Dexter and Dexter and the Big Cat were in 5 techniques, 4 eyes, as the defensive end, defensive tackle hybrids in that 34 defense as Graham ran it. And then they would have a guy in the middle that was, once they lost, what's the guy that they the nose that they had, who I really love, that they got rid of. They traded to Cincinnati.
BJ Hill.
Well, yeah, when they lost BJ Hill, and then they lost the other guy that they drafted, they didn't re-sign.
Hankins.
What's that?
Hankins.
Wasn't Hankins, but it'll come back to me in a second. But it just wasn't strong in the middle. It wasn't strong. It was strong around the tackles because that's where those 2 guys were. It wasn't strong around the middle. So they brought those 2 guys inside. They made the middle stronger, and it helped to hide deficiencies at linebacker to a certain extent. And then you added in those edge rushers. Now you've got a Kayvon and you've got an Aziz when healthy. Both of those guys being able to chase around. That's the biggest difference in this defense from what Graham had. Graham was strong on the edges, and we got killed up the middle. Like, even when Blake Martinez was healthy we still were getting killed up the middle because he was getting guys pushed back into his face, or those guards were able to climb up to the second level and get body on Martinez. Once they were able to bring those 2 guys in, Lawrence and Williams, it forced the offense to have to put 2 bodies on them. You're not securing them with 1 body. That's 1 less guy, 2 less guys that are able to climb to the second level, and that's why they had a lot of success. But if you saw, when they played Philly, they told Kelsey, Lawrence, that's your guy. And Kelsey was able to handle Lawrence on a regular basis, which allowed those guards to now get up to the linebackers, which is why you saw those lanes so open in the run game versus Philadelphia. So I think that that was the biggest thing that we saw, is that the more of those inability to be able to just push us up the middle for, drive after drive after drive. Eventually, we were going to shut it down and you were going to get into a 3rd and long. That's something that Patrick Graham wasn't able to continuously do with his defense. And the bend but don't break was too much bending. And eventually it broke because of all of the snaps they were taking on defense. Whereas Coach Wink, the bending was a little bit of bending, a little flexing, but then they were able to hold and anchor down, and now they're forcing you into a field goal or forcing you into a punt.
All right. So now the same question as I asked you about the offense. Now that we know that Wink is coming back, he was eliminated from contention for the Colts head coaching job. What is the next logical step for year 2 of this defense? What do they need to do, or what do you think they can do?
Coach Wink is a linebackers coach, like through and through, right? You got to get him a linebacker. You've got to get him a linebacker that he feels good about. And by the way, I think that Jalen Smith is a guy who's proven he probably should be a part of this defense going forward. Out of all of those linebackers they ran through, and they ran through a lot of them, to me, Jalen Smith is the closest to a guy on this roster right now who could be the guy next to whomever the guy they bring in next year, because of his athleticism and his size and being able to kind of have that, both of those work together. But you got to get him a linebacker. You got to get him a linebacker who can be the quarterback of this defense, and take that off of Xavier McKinney. Right. I think that while I don't think it's bad to have a safety be your leader of the defense, I just really think it works better when you have a linebacker that could be the leader of your defense, and then you have a safety that's also a leader. Like, I think that works. It's twofold there. And so they have to bring in a linebacker, somebody that can be in the mold of these linebackers that we see running around the NFL now. It's not necessarily about how big they are. It's about their ability to move, their ability to read and diagnose plays quickly, and then get to the ball. And so I think that was the downfall for some of these other linebackers that were out there, is their ability to read and diagnose plays quickly, that allowed them to either get caught up or behind or make a wrong read, and then that would leave wide open running lanes for opposing offenses to be able to exploit. So I think it starts with adding a linebacker. I think it goes to adding a cornerback prospect. I don't know whether that's through the draft, because I don't know what capital they're going to want to invest into another cornerback with who they have coming back and kind of the unknowns of Robinson and Flott with the limited amount of time that they had to play this year. I think that that addition could come via free agency, but they have to do something. I think it starts at linebacker, getting better on that second level, and then it moves to cornerback, getting better, more effective ball hawks on the outside. You can't have this attacking style defense that is unable to get any interceptions. Like, you can't finish the year with 4 interceptions and 3 of them come from safeties, and the 4th one come from a cornerback that just happened to be in the game because a bunch of other people were hurt, and then he was filling in for a guy. Like, that's just not you can't have your number 1 cornerback get 0 interceptions. Your number 2 cornerback gets 0 interceptions. Your number 3 cornerback gets 0 interceptions. That's not a recipe for your defense to be good, especially when we know that Coach Wink wants to attack. He didn't attack as much. He wants to attack, but you can't attack when your guys don't make plays on the ball. Like, balls hitting defensive backs in the chest, balls hitting defensive backs in the hands and them knocking them down. Like, good teams have guys back there that intercept those passes. And the Giants did not have those guys at all at the cornerback position this year. I love Adoree Jackson. I love what he brings to the table. He's never been a guy who intercepts passes. So you know what you got there. You can't have another guy like Adoree Jackson on the other side, or else you're never getting that quick turnover that a lot of these other defenses are able to take advantage of.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I look at the defense and the offense, I mean, to me, the personnel that's needed most is on that defensive side, starting with a linebacker. And let's not forget defensive line. I think we can both agree that they cannot continue overworking Dexter Lawrence and the big cat like they did this year. I mean, when those guys came off the field, I think, can we agree that there was a noticeable drop off?
Absolutely. But you got to rob Peter to pay Paul somewhere, right? You can't,
exactly.
Like, everywhere can't be thick. I'm out here at the Super Bowl. Philadelphia has a great defensive backfield, but as soon as one of those guys get hurt, it gets ugly because they don't have any depth back there. You can't fill out everything. Right. I think it's easier to find more serviceable backup defensive linemen than it is to find a good starting linebacker or a good starting cornerback. They're not going to spend like starting draft capital on a defensive tackle when you have those two guys, unless they decide to move on from Leonard Williams. And if they decide to move on from Leonard Williams, then we have a whole nother conversation. We'll be back here talking about what are they doing and what are they going to do, because you lose Leonard Williams and this thing gets ugly quick. Like, we saw what it was like when he was out versus what it's like when he's there. So if people still don't see the value of Leonard Williams because he's not out here getting, 15 sacks or 10 sacks a season, then we're going to have a completely different conversation when I start opening up this video and letting you guys watch what it looks like when those guys aren't in the middle. It's a ugly proposition. Those linebackers have really big eyes when Dexter Lawrence is out or when Leonard Williams are out.
All right, Gene. So with the off seasons cranking up, effective today, Monday, now that the Super Bowl is in the books, if you're Joe Schoen, what is your plan? How do you prioritize how you are going to address some of these deficiencies on both offense and defense? I know it's, the draft class, we still have to see, the combine, we still got to see the pro days and stuff like that. So, but how do you prioritize it, or do you prioritize it, or how do you approach it?
Well, I think that the first thing as a GM, Shane is trying to do right now is he's probably made the decision on the guys that are on this team that he wants back, right? So I don't think it's a matter of, hey, do they want Daniel Jones back? Do they want they've already made that decision. One way or another, they've said, we want these people back at this price if we can get them. If not, we're moving on, or we'll make arrangements. But now, as far as addressing the issues to make the team better, I think you have to start with priority one on offense and priority one on defense. Whatever that is for Joe, I don't know. I would assume, just judging by what I believe the major deficiencies are on the offense and defense, is that priority one on offense has to be, we need a center. Like, we need to shore up the interior of this offensive line. We're gonna work under the assumption that Neal and his footwork is going to improve in year two. He'll be a better offensive lineman in year two than he was in year one. He's a rookie. He's young. We're playing a long game. Cool. The interior of this offensive line cannot look like that next year. Bar none. We can't rely on feel-good stories or guys who are just journeymen who've never really been at that position. We need a guy who is a center, who has been a center. Maybe he has some versatility where he could play guard too, but he is a center. And he can come in and be the leader of this offense from the offensive line perspective. The guy who can come in and make the calls, the guys who can come in and anchor down and clean up a little bit of the stuff that maybe we might have with a guard if we can't add a better guard prospect. Ben Powers is out there, by the way, just saying. But that has to be priority number one on the offensive line. Priority number 2 is probably an X. On defense, is it linebacker or is it cornerback? They have a billion cornerbacks on this roster right now. There were, I believe, 8 or 9 starters. I can't remember what I wrote right now, but 8 or 9 starters at cornerback. Guys who logged a start at cornerback on this team, and our cornerbacks were not really good. That's not a good sign. So cornerback might be it, linebacker might be it, but you've got to identify one, and then you have to say, are we going to address that number one issue through the draft? Or are we going to address that number one issue through free agency? They might say, hey, the pool at cornerback is deeper in the draft, so we're going to address that through draft, or linebacker, so we'll address that through draft, but we need to go out and find a free agent center, or vice versa. So I think those are the types of conversation that Shane is having with his team and with the coaching staff to say, hey, what do you need? Like, hey, Coach Wink, what makes your defense better right now? Like, what could we give you that would make your defense better than it was last year right now, as soon as he touches the field? And I think that once you do that, you put those in place, everything else kind of then, trickles into the spots that it's supposed to trickle into.
Hey, Giant fans, the NFL season might be over, but the NBA season is in full swing. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 if their first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to the spread and more. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your first bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook betting partner of the NBA. Hey, Giant fans, don't forget to check out the Locked On Giants podcast on Instagram. We're at Locked On Giants. And also check out my Instagram account at Patty Traina, PATTITRAINA. We've got video clips. We've got factoids, all kinds of cool stuff. Hope to see you over on social media. If all things were equal, and they could choose, draft or free agency, if you were building this roster and addressing the needs, is there a preference that you would go for at the key positions? In other words, for receiver, would you prefer a veteran, or would you want to start over with a rookie? At linebacker, would you want a veteran, or would you want to start out with a rookie?
It depends on where we believe we are. If we really believe that this playoff run wasn't fluky, I believe this playoff run was a little fluky, judging by the beginning of the season and then what happened in the second half of the season. The only 2 or 3 really highly effective offensive passing games were against the worst defense in football and a team who had given up. Like, if you don't think this was a fluke, if you think that what we have, then you've got to build with some veterans. You got to bring some veterans in to be able to take the next step. If you think that it was slightly fluky and we're ahead of schedule, build through the draft. Because in my opinion, this team isn't winning a Super Bowl next year. And if this team is not winning a Super Bowl next year, then why am I bringing in mercenaries? Mercenaries are there to win. They're there to get you over the top. And that's all free agents are these days. Unless you've lucked up into a Leonard Williams that the Jets foolhardily just give you, and you're able to then add him now for the next 5 to 8 years, then okay, cool. But if you're just talking about like a 31-year-old receiver or a 28-year-old linebacker or a 27-year-old running back, you're bringing those guys in to help you win right now. And if you're not prepared to win a championship right now, then that's not a good investment, because they're going to cost more. Like, you're not going to get really good players for cheap unless they have something to prove. Like, unless somebody, made them look bad last season and now they have to come back and have a prove it year like a Justin Houston did, but usually that talent is going to cost. Whereas if you build through the draft, you can build, you can develop. It's a lost art in the NFL of developing talent. You can develop, and you can look 2 to 3 years from now as this is our time to really ascend. Because I don't care what anyone says, once you're not paying a quarterback on a rookie deal, it's go time. Like, you don't have a lot of time. The clock is ticking. If they pay Daniel Jones $35 million, $40 million to be their starting quarterback, and he comes out here and gives you 15 passing touchdowns, 7 rushing touchdowns, and somewhere close to 4,000 total yards, that's not good enough. Like, that's not championship level things. So, like, if you're building and you're saying, hey, we think we have the guys right now, okay, cool. Go out in free agency, pull a receiver that's going to, or through trade, pull a receiver that's going to come in and be a killer right now. Pull a linebacker that's going to be a killer right now. Bring James Bradbury back. Like, do the things that are going to get you infinitely closer to that goal right now. But if you don't believe that you're going to be a Super Bowl contender next year, then add some nice pieces through free agency, but build your team through the draft.
And I think that's how Joe Schoen's going to approach it, because everybody, I think if you were to ask him at the start of the year, would he have expected what happened? I don't know if he would have admitted that, if he would hook him up to a lie detector test.
Nobody would.
Right.
And I don't think that's a diss. Like, everybody knew that this Giants team was better than what their record showed the last couple of years, but nobody thought this Giants team was a playoff team, let alone a second round of the playoff team.
Yeah.
So being ahead of schedule doesn't mean, okay, let's speed everything up. Unless you believe being ahead of schedule was something based off of, we just took a larger leap than what we thought we were going to take. See, Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville's ascension was a lot more based off of, those guys just took another step. Like, they got lucky and got a tight end from somewhere, I don't know where, that came in and was really, really good as a tight end, like he's been his entire career when he's healthy. But you get a guy like that who's motivated and all that. You get these receivers who were all brought in. Not one of their receivers are like homegrown receivers. They're all receivers from other teams who they brought in free agency, but were younger at the time, or at least 2 out of 3. So they were able to ascend. The quarterback ascended. The running back, who was drafted in the first round, by the way, and people said, that was a stupid pick, and now he's one of the best backs in the game. Just saying, people, running backs matter. Running backs matter. But they might be on the ascension. If they said, hey, let's add some free agent pieces and try to make a run at this thing, I wouldn't necessarily be mad at them. I do believe they should still stay the course, but if they did it, I wouldn't be mad. I'm not sure if that's going to be the way for the Giants. If you bring in free agents next year and they only just get back to the playoffs and then they're bounced, did you really help the situation? At some point, whatever you sign Daniel Jones for is going to get to a situation of either a balloon payment that you're not going to want to make, or an opportunity for you to get out of the contract for a low number. Yeah. And then we're going to be right back in this situation again, right? With no clear delineation of what we are or are not as a team without that guy. So if you make the commitment to Jones, which I think they're leaning towards, if you make that commitment to Jones, that's a commitment to say, we plan on winning a Super Bowl within the next 3 years. That's the window. Within the next 3 years, we plan, because if it's a 5-year deal, year 4 and year 5, you're going to be up against the cap again. So now your ability to be able to pull in free agents and sign, that's going to be limited. But these next 3 years are the windows. As some of these other contracts come off the books, as you get money back and you're able to spend it, you've got your quarterback under contract for 3 to 5 years in the future. You know that those 3 years are going to be critical. You've got to make a run for a championship in those 3 years. We're not talking about Patrick Mahomes. There's only one Patrick Mahomes. So, with that, you have to be ready to make those legitimate decisions if that's where you're going. And I just don't know. It'll be interesting to watch. I want to see it. I'm going to write a lot about it because it's fun. Like, it's fun to watch a team get built and what the philosophy is on getting built. I would love that sit down and just have like a sit down conversation about building the team and what they think is like, where they honestly think they are and how fast they think they could get to championship level Giants, a championship level Giants team. That would be fun.
Well, like I always tell people, the Giants didn't deteriorate overnight. They're not going to be built up overnight. It's going to take some time. So, you got to be patient. I think last year
and Giants fans don't work hand in hand.
Well, I understand it. I understand it, though, because the last decade, Giant fans have been promised, we're going to fix this. We're going to get this turned around. And what have they gotten? Nothing. So I understand the frustration, believe me, but I think Shane, has shown that he's patient, as evidenced by the fact that he didn't blow a whole bunch of draft picks for a number one receiver last year, despite making a playoff run. I think that was very telling as to how he's thinking about approaching building a roster.
Absolutely. I think he was smart in that respect, although I would not have been mad at him at that point if he had said, if we could bring in another guy. Like, I wouldn't have been mad, but I liked his patience. I liked his ability to withstand what everybody wanted him to do. I think that was a good move on him. But I think that's a move that signals that he believed we're not a receiver away, right? Because if you felt you were a receiver away and you didn't go and get a receiver, then that's just silly. Right. But if you don't feel a receiver is not going to solve all of the issues, then that was smart to hold your water there.
Yeah, absolutely. Gene, great stuff as always. My gosh, when you and I start talking ball, wow, it gets so deep. I love it. We'll have you on again because, especially as free agency starts to unwind a little bit. And that's coming up before we know it. I mean, we got the combine. First, we're going to have a couple weeks downtime, which I think we all can use. Then you got the combine, and then decisions have to be made about franchise tags. And then we roll right into free agency on March 15th. There's going to be plenty to talk about the land of the Giants. So
the Super Bowl being pushed to all the way to this late into February. Yeah, it's killing any type of like recharging of the batteries you get to do because you just roll right from the Super Bowl, and then in a couple of weeks we're drafting and we're combining. You know what I'm saying? It's just it's nonstop. But it's a great time when you want to see what the next steps are for your team, and you have an ascending team, and it's great for Giants and Giants fans to be looking at an ascending team as opposed to what they've had to look at over the last few years, which is we don't know what we are. Yeah. So that's great.
Yep. Lots to definitely talk about coming up. So Gene, appreciate all the insight. Great stuff as always. We will see you again on the podcast because I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to talk about as this whole off season unfolds. Giant fans, thank you so much for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Be sure to check out Coach Gene's work on Giants Country. He's got plenty of stuff coming up as well as stuff that's already out. Check out his podcast, Talk Spicy. And his other work, he's with The Athletic. He's with Football Game Plan, along with Emery Hunt, who hopefully I'll be able to get on the program as well. We will see you tomorrow, Giant fans, with all new content. Take care.